but it's about the experience, and it's about the mobile experience, and it's hitting us in so many different ways. So how do you create competitive edge with mobile experience? This is a topic we picked because we got some feedback from some folks. This is what we should be talking about. So we got a panel that's going to be led by the moderator, Casey Wolff-Ingham. And Casey is the experienced design practice lead with North Highland Group. So at this time, to open up the discussions, I'm going to invite Casey up here and to talk about a little bit about what he does and North Highland, introduce himself, as well as introduce the panelists and get into this hot topic discussion. So Casey, hey. Please help me welcome Casey.
Hey everyone, I'll just smash my knee on the way in. That's what happens to tall people. So before we get started, I run the experience design group Sparks Grove. So Sparks Grove, which is part of North Highland, has an omni-channel experience design group. I think that's one of the things that we're probably going to end up touching on today, which is that we have CX strategy, service design, and UX. So we like to look at design from the perspective of designing for the whole user journey. Before I invite up my esteemed colleagues and the panel here, I wanted to make you guys do a little bit of work tonight. I know you're going to be asking some questions, but I thought I'd start by asking you guys a couple of questions. One of the great things about the mobile industry is it always has the really good stats. So can anyone tell me what is the significance of June 29th, 2007?
iPhone.
Good. So we're only almost 10 years from the launch of the iPhone 1, not even a decade yet. And similarly, by 2020, it's expected that the planet of the population will be about 8 billion. What number do you think is estimated? I think this is Andreessen Horowitz, these numbers, to have smartphones, not mobile phones, smartphones by 2020 of that 8 billion?
80%.
5 billion. So I know we live and breathe this every day, but the stats never cease to kind of stop me and make me think. So the topic today is especially important, right? Because really leveraging mobile to create a competitive edge is a huge part of what we focus on every day, but it's going to be even more important going forward. So please, panelists, come up.
Want to leave this one empty?
Grab your seats. Yeah, if you like.
I'll go down there.
Sure.
That was not as ceremonious as I thought it was going to be.
I know, sorry. Yeah. I did say I was going to make people work. Applause, please. So we have got a great panel representing very diverse parts of the industry, so I'm really looking forward to the discussion. I'll start immediately on my left, and we'll move down the line. Joe, if you'd like to introduce yourself briefly.
Sure. My name is Joe Conway. I'm the CEO and founder of Stable Kernel, and we develop mobile software and back-end software, bigger systems for other companies. So we are consultants, mercenaries, and we're very good at it.
Do you kill people? Or just develop apps? Okay. Later.
Only with their products.
Right, exactly.
Matt?
So hi everybody, I'm Matt Jones. I work at the Home Depot. It's a pleasure for me to take part in the panel discussion tonight because using mobile to create a competitive advantage is something that we've been trying to do at the Home Depot for a number of years now. And I'm looking forward to sharing some of the things that we've done and some of the things that we're working on now to try to continue to extend that and bring a very vibrant, rich, kind of interconnected retail experience to our customer base.
My name is Kelly Reed, and I'm with Cricket Wireless. I've been with AT&T for 15 years, so I'm excited to be here to be representing Cricket in particular, thus the green. And I've had the pleasure of working in mobility my whole career, so I've seen a lot of things come and go in the mobility space, and the mobile experience is really dynamic. It's exciting, and it's the face of mobility has changed, as you've intimated already, so so much over the past 10 years that I'm excited to see where the conversation goes tonight and kind of what you guys are thinking as well as to where that's going to go.
That's great, Kelly. Thank you. Thank you all. So does anyone want to, and I can do the work for you at this point if you want me to, throw out for me, when we start talking about competitive edge, let's get specific. Like, what do we really mean by competitive edge? So, anyone want to take a swag at that? Any MBAs in the audience? I'll do it. So just to define clearly, a conditional circumstance that puts a company in a favorable or superior business position. So when we talk about mobile and creating competitive edge, we're actually asking, in many ways, a lot from mobile and frankly, a single channel. So starting the panel off with the hard stuff, and maybe in at the deep end, my first question is, should we or can we expect mobile to create competitive advantage? And do I have a volunteer to take that first?
I'll start. I'd say the one way I think about it's a very, sort of thought-provoking question, Casey. In my experience, what I've seen in terms of developing a competitive advantage doesn't last long. There's always, smaller, innovative, or larger, well-funded, well-backed companies watching customer behavior just as closely as you might be and trying to develop something that you've developed or tune something that you've developed and deliver it in a slightly different way. It's incredibly hard, I think, now because of the amount of focus globally that's going on with mobile. Every company realizes how important it is to their future success. It's not like back in 2007 and 2008 where you could put out an app and get, 1 million downloads because you were the only person that provided that particular service to a given marketplace. I'd say it's harder now to really get a sustained competitive advantage, for most companies. There are certainly things that you can do that are innovative, and things that you can do to patent and things that you can do to try to protect yourself. But if you look at Apple with the iPhone, that was a revolutionary device, right? They had a lot of patents for touchscreen technology. They had a lot of patents for, some really interesting ways for people to interact with the device, for app stores, things like that. A couple years later, Google really, in effect, developed something that was very, very similar to the iPhone. Not very different, from an operating system point of view, from a hardware point of view. So, the competitive advantage even of the iPhone, which was so groundbreaking and so revolutionary, didn't really last that long.
Yeah, and I think it used to be that you would compete just by having an app, right? As long as you had an app, because your core business was elsewhere, right? And so you'd compete just by having an application. Now everyone has an application.
You differentiated by having an app.
Yeah. And so now that everyone can build one, and there's so many developers out there that can do this type of stuff, then it's no longer just okay to just be there, right? You actually have to compete within that specific space. And that is about delivering the most value you can to the folks that are using your application as part of a larger product offering. And we've seen it a million times when people just want to be in the App Store. And it's kind of like, well, that doesn't do anything for you, right? That's not going to help you, that there's 1 million entries out there. There's probably 20 people that have your keywords already sort of scooped up in the App Store. And so it's about actually using that as a tool to add additional competition to, or add additional ability to your competitive value.
I think you guys hit it directly on the head. I also think, since we're all technologists here, it depends on how we define terms. So I like the fact that you're defining terms. It depends on who the we is and who the yous are. We as technologists can make small wins, and we've brought some real cutting edge things. I'm sure all 3 of us have, all 4 of us have, you guys have brought really cool ideas to market that might not have resonated necessarily with the customer. And I think the competitive advantage is, as you've sort of discussed, can be fickle, really, right? And I think the question, if we focus the who is it that the we is, if it's the customer, it's because by nature, I think a lot of we are whimsical with regard to how we're looking at mobility. when you're talking about businesses, I think it's a different animal. I think that businesses that are looking for structure, so we have two different aspects that we're dealing with regard to competitive advantage. And I think that the ability to cross through between B2C and B2B, that's where I see a lot of emerging opportunity, at least in my opinion, with how the mobile experience is becoming kind of an interesting thing, and that's also known as omni-channel offerings. So
I wonder, you said the two different facets of it, because maybe you have a different idea of it, and maybe I have a different idea of it, and then together we have multiple ideas.
Yay!
But to me, if you're leveraging mobile in some way, leveraging any tool, one, you're looking at somehow either acquiring customers or making customers' lives better so they come to you, but also you're talking about internal efficiencies.
Yes.
And those are the two bigs. I think people miss out on the second one.
Agreed.
An awful lot. There's so many things, apps that we've written that never see the light of day, but they have a significant impact on the way a company does their business.
And it's the aggregation too, right? Like, how do you might come up with the best idea that would make people's lives better, easier, faster, whatever, but if customers don't know about it, is it an idea? It's the whole concept of if tree falls, does anyone hear it? If no one's there to hear it, does it make a sound, rather? I think that's kind of the whole point, and so it's, as technologists, we can come up with these great ideas, but it's also making sure that the customer, there's an awareness of what that idea is, and so that, and I think we as consumers can be fickle, which is great. It's what makes all of us employed.
That's great. Could you guys take a swag, and the panel actually really represents a great cross section here. I think we had a little bit of a conversation for the panel, obviously, and we talked about the kind of like diversity of what innovation and competitive advantage can mean to an entity the size of Home Depot at one end of the spectrum, and then a startup that's moving in from the side and coming in quickly and disrupting, right? Those are two very, very different kind of circumstances when we talk about competitive edge. And I know, Joe, you started off as a developer many years ago. I was there. We knew each other, and I did. You did a great job. You totally threw me. Thank you. But you alluded to the fact that things have changed a lot, and back then the skills you had were not necessarily in higher demand, but basically there were a lot fewer people who could do it. So now that you're competing against 50,000 other development jobs, how do you create competitive advantage? Or how do you approach creating competitive advantage?
Well, there's some secret sauce involved there. I don't know if we want to get into it, but specific to our company, which probably won't resonate, that well in this room, because we're a small company. We're 25 people, right? But we build software for very large companies and also very small companies. And I think what's interesting, it's sort of at the beginning of the question.
And I'd love for you to get to the small company part as well, because I think Matt can give us that perspective from.
Makes sense. From a small company perspective, they're either attacking a problem that someone doesn't really know exists or is not recognizing it, or they're attacking it with a brand new solution. And they're not really worried about necessarily, are we everywhere to solve this problem? Are we on mobile? Are we on desktop? Are we in people's backyards? Whatever it happens to be. They're not worried about all those specific things. They're just on one channel, just trying to go in and attack this one problem and just try and get there. And then if it's successful, and if they were right that this is a problem and they were right that this is the right solution for it, then they can spread out to the other factions of it. So it's like this attacking position versus, and I'm not going to steal your thunder here, but a bigger company sometimes, ones that we've worked with, and they sometimes have that same mentality, which is great, but sometimes they have sort of a more defensive position, which is they see a new channel like mobile, for example, that comes in and says, well, we just need to be there. And because if our competitors go there and we're not there, then there's this cascading effect. Well, I don't bank with you anymore because these guys have an app and you don't. It doesn't matter if your app's any good. And that becomes this situation where they say, let's just get our stuff in there. It doesn't have to be good, doesn't have to solve any extra problems, doesn't have to create any extra value. We're just in this particular channel. And so what we challenge big companies to do is actually think small, which is tackle this like a startup. Tackle this like, yes, you are defending your position across this new channel for an already solved problem and you have multiple competitors here, but you also need to deliver some extra value. Because if you're doing that, then you just blow everyone else away.
Good answer, thank you. Matt?
So the way I think about this is, something you said kind of hit me, which was, hey, we just need to get into the App Store. It doesn't need to be good. It can suck, but we just need to be there, right? That's okay in certain verticals where customer expectations are low. And I'd say, if you go back 7 or 8 years ago, every vertical customer expectation was low, right? There weren't any apps out there, and the ones that were out there were, mediocre at best. But what happens at a really interesting sort of accelerating pace is the expectations go up. Think about e-commerce. Think about e-commerce 20 years ago versus what our expectations as consumers are now. Now we want to be able to shop for anything, be able to get it delivered, at a very low cost in a very rapid fashion, and have a great customer experience with whatever device or platform or, sort of interface we're using. So the bar has been raised pretty significantly to us as consumers in a number of verticals. We were talking earlier about the Delta app. The Delta app 5 years ago was nothing to write home about. The Delta app now is an indispensable travel companion. It's phenomenal, right? The Home Depot app 5 or 6 years ago was nothing to write home about. Now it's got a lot of capabilities that make shopping our store, make shopping our digital experiences a richer, more fulfilling experience. So I think what's interesting is what's table stakes at certain points can quickly, in the span of 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, maybe 18 months, become pretty significantly impactful to a customer experience with your brand.
Just a quick follow-on before we get to Kelly. How easy or difficult is it for a corporation the size of Home Depot to pivot, to move, to iterate, to innovate?
Difficult question, because I think it depends, and this is a little bit of a cop-out, but when you have a large litany of competing priorities, of opportunities that you have as a retailer or as an airline or as a media company, it's always challenging to sort of prioritize the things that you want to go after that are going to be successful versus the things that maybe are a little bit more risky, that have lesser near-term results but longer, greater long-term results. I think the trick is trying to figure out how to retain an innovation type of culture inside of a big company. Do the things that are the basic blocking and tackling, but continue to try to iterate at the margins and innovate and deliver things for customers that won't pay off for many years to come. And that's a balance. Right. That's a balance in a small company. That's a balance in a big company.
Do you find you have to tackle that from an organizational perspective?
Not
having an innovation team and
no, not always. I'd say we try to deploy an innovation mindset across a lot of our different areas of the company. Sometimes you don't always need to have that special team that's off in a secret room doing things. Sometimes you do. It depends on the circumstances, but I think companies that are successful have a culture, a leadership, a values component to their company that really values that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. If that makes sense.
That's great. Kelly, thanks for being patient.
I'm going to speak more from my experiences with Cricut. AO Cricut is being really focused on the customer. And we started as a kind of in our own startup mode, right? And so AO, from the AO part of it, because we later acquired Cricut, we were a startup within AT&T. And everything was an opportunity to improve on. An expression I heard in a meeting, not at work, actually outside of work, was there are no sacred cows. And the concept being really that you could go out and find best of breed that would solve the business problems that Cricut, at the time AO, customers had. And so we were fortunate enough to have sort of the best of both, right? We had that startup mentality with strong, smart leadership to say, go out and find what is going to solve the business problems that are there. But we had the security and backing of AT&T to ensure that we were, frankly, that our checks were getting cashed, and that we had the due diligence, financial rigor to make decisions for companies that would do the right thing, and for us as a business. So I think as Cricket, it's a little bit of a different question, right? Because our ability in answering it most succinctly, I guess, is we had to and continue to have to, as a business, solve the business problem, but think of it in a startup mentality. Because our customers, we don't have big business customers, right? We have to be where our customers need us. And we need to target our customers' needs because that's what's going to keep us relevant as an organization. Not that that's different, but it's the approach that's different. Is we think startup, it's very much like what we're doing. We think startup, but we have the benefit of a larger company.
And you guys kind of triggered something as I was listening, talking about how as a much larger companies are backed by a much larger companies and having sort of these short-term goals and these long-term goals. One thing that just popped in my mind when you were saying that is like, we don't really get an opportunity at a smaller company to have a long-term goal. I mean, we do, but it's just survive to a certain extent, right? And so part of that competitive advantage there.
But you have it in your head, I bet.
I do.
You have a vision,
nice.
Right?
It's
I mean, entrepreneurs have visions.
Right. And I do, but in terms of the actual work that's going into it, right? Can't compete with, say, an innovation division that you guys might have, for example, because you guys can take that loss. Whereas if we're not making money, we're losing money, and if you lose too much of it, then you're gone, right? And it's just an interesting thing when you start talking about that competitive edge, and then you talk about, there's something else that you said to loop that all back together, is when you have this ability to maybe go and take a loss somewhere, or just, not necessarily a loss, but just sort of put some feelers out there, right? If you look at, say, this week when all of the Siri integration came out, and all these different tools that are now available on mobile, the cost to build an app, like an iPhone or an Android application that takes advantage of all of these features is so significant. And so, as a smaller company, and I'm not talking about us at this point, but if a smaller company comes to us and says we want to build this application, we can't do all those things for them because they don't have the money to do it right now. And so part of that competitive edge is having the ability to burn resources on something that may or may not pay out, in hopes that it does, but at least you're there and you're that stopgap if that is a great feature.
Right.
The flip side of that, though, is that as a startup, you have the ability to, you don't have something that Casey, you mentioned, which is organizational challenges, right? Like you can say, this is where the puck is going, and I'm skating there.
I do get to be a dictator, which makes things like I could be wrong.
You could be wrong.
Aaron's sitting over there, is like,
yeah. Don't feed the ego. Don't feed the ego. But but I mean, I think and
That's a very good point.
I think that there are pros and cons to everything. But yes, there's a lot of innovation within Cricket, within AT&T. But there are also a lot of people involved in that, and a lot of people who can block that from actually coming forward. Even though, again, genius idea, and not maliciously, but just basic things like, I don't get it, or how much?
Right.
I mean, you know what I mean? Like those kinds of legit.
Legal's gonna have a field day.
There's no way because, and you look at those things and they're real.
Yeah.
They're real issues.
Right. And actually, Kelly, listening to you talk there, you put me in mind of the new product development game. Don't know if you guys remember that article, but this was an article in the Harvard Business Review in 1986, and it was actually what spawned the name for the Scrum and Agile movement, and it was by a business professor, a Japanese business professor at Harvard, who basically studied successful teams in large companies and what it took for them to be successful and be able to move and iterate. And listening to you describe how Cricket set up kind of put me in mind of that article. How autonomous were you allowed to be from the parent company? Is that something you can talk to?
Yeah, I mean, I think that really what it comes. I actually, so next week I'll be celebrating 15 years with AT&T.
Congrats.
Yeah, thanks. And it's a great company. I mean, I genuinely can say it's a great company. It was unbelievably autonomous. There are people in here that were on the team when we started, on my team, and it was, here's the world, figure out the best that's going to solve the problems that we're facing. That's an unbelievable feeling. It can be overwhelming, especially when you have years of large business mindset. So you have to bring in new thinkers as well as retrain your brain. But it was really exciting to be there. And then, in a way, we kind of did it again when we acquired Cricket, because and merged with them, because they had really great ideas as well. And it was, how do you bring the best of breed when you were a successful business and they were a successful business, and how do you bring them together and not lose the momentum? And oh, by the way, don't lose a bunch of customers, because then there was really no point in the merger to begin with. So, so it was a really complex but exciting time to be part of that family at that time.
If I could follow up with a question. So I recently went through an experience where we brought on like a really big bank, right? And they're so old and stodgy about the way that they do business. And so the way that they formed their team in order to get us on, it was a bunch of people from, like 6 different locations, right? To come together and form this team to push this thing through, because it was so strange. I kind of wonder how the team that you guys were on formed. Like, what was were you already in place and it just sort of moved on from there, or did you kind of start picking around and saying, like, this person knows what they're talking about, or how'd that go?
I can tell you my experience. Let me give you my experience. Been kicking around a while. Love the company, had great opportunities, got to work on all sorts of cool stuff. And I got a phone call, and they said, I can't tell you what we're talking about, what we want to talk about, until you sign the NDA, but I really want to talk to you. Okay.
What's in the box?
Yeah, exactly. Like, who doesn't want to say, sure? So what happened was, I met with someone and who I had known for years, and it was an opportunity. And the caveat to all of this is that the key was, you had to be willing to be an AT&T person, but not, right? And it was weird, because it was like, what does that mean? And it was, they wanted the thinking and the history and the beauty of AT&T there, but they wanted you to be willing to ask the hard question of, is that the right choice for this customer? And that's tough. Because Home Depot, you guys, like, which customer are we talking about, right?
Yeah.
And to define that.
I'm gonna jump on that, because I think you brought up an excellent point. It's maybe not something that we talked about before, but talk data to me, right? So how does data, right, whether it's from an analytics perspective or kind of big data, what we're collecting, what we're learning, where does that play into this kind of competitive advantage picture?
Yes.
Good answer.
I don't think I'm the only one that
Sure.
this is not just for me. So I've been talking a lot, so I'm gonna pass it over to the.
And that's to all of you.
Yeah.
Okay, so
have a think.
data. I think about data as a tool. Data is a tool that helps inform your decision making. It helps you deliver richer customer experiences. It helps you personalize an experience. But you can't also lose sight of, great design too. And I think some of the best products do an effective job of marrying those two things together. And sometimes those are left brain, right brain, different types of people as well. It's important to be data centric in your thinking, but it's also important to be able to recognize great design when you see it as well.
Yeah, good.
It's interesting, because I feel like a lot of times the collecting of the data is an afterthought for so many things. And when that afterthought comes to fruition, it's just like, let's put analytics on this thing and just check to see when they press the register button. It's like, well, it doesn't really buy you anything, right? And we recently rebuilt this this system that had a lot to do with how your HVAC and your water heaters work in your home. And when you controlled them remotely, message went there, changed it, and then just disappeared forever. And so you just lost the greatest opportunity in the entire world to track absolutely everything that this person is doing, which is really creepy. And that's a separate discussion I imagine we have to have at some point as a society. But But the idea is that everything is effectively trackable in some way. And because storage is so cheap now, you might as well just track as much as you possibly can, as long as it's not as long as you're not harming the system as a whole, and I'm talking about software here, and you're tracking the things that you need to track, you don't know when that becomes valuable. I think it's the biggest thing about data is you don't know when it actually becomes valuable until you need it, and if you don't have it, you're kicking yourself that you didn't have it the entire time.
Define what you mean by harm in that context.
Well, and I don't mean like a moral harm, I guess, is the whole thing. I mean that if your system is rigged up in such a way where it adds an extra 200 milliseconds to a response time because we really feel the need to channel this thing out to 500 different things and collect that into 4 different instances, right? Like that would be harm. So I only mean it in the sense that you serve the customer first, and if they can serve you as part of that, well then fantastic.
Just out of interest, in the kind of startup world that you also live in and that your business serves, have you seen any kind of correlation between those startups and businesses that are really kind of coming at it from a data perspective and or looking, where are people dropping out in the funnel? What's going to create conversion at this point? What do we do to solve those problems? Have you seen any kind of correlation between those companies that are more successful, kind of paying more attention to that?
Yeah, what's interesting, yes, definitely. But what's interesting about it is that the startups often, because like I said, we work with a mix of companies, and so the startups often get into a situation where it's just, again, get us from point A to point B, and I'm not interested in seeing the scenery on the way there. And so they aren't addressing those things.
How do you coach a new customer to think about that so that they're not already to point B and then asking how they got there?
And that's a great question, because most of the time when someone comes to us, they're already at point B. Here's a feature list, here's what we want to do. Well, hang on here, all right? Like, tell me what problem you're actually trying to solve really quick, and let's start the clock back. And so, I mean, from our business perspective, it's a blessing and a curse, because it turns the sales cycle into 6 months, just on average, because you have to start and you have to go back, and then there's a talk and a conversation, and then finally you get to the point where you do it. But bigger companies obviously have the ability to spend more and start on that type of stuff and thinking about that and having more people having a say in that sort of thing. But what's interesting was we recently worked with a company who kind of came in with this initial idea about managing sports teams and schedules. And we started collecting information for them. So as part of that, they had all this information about sports teams and schedules. And they actually turned around and said, well, we have all this information. We can turn around and sell them merchandise agreements, so we can go and do the purchasing through like an Under Armour or a Nike, and we can figure out what they're all paying to get these jerseys, and we can actually go and negotiate on their behalf. And they completely pivoted their model based on that data, because they just had access to this thing that they weren't going for that in the first place. And all of a sudden they're like, wait, here's all these things. And so the coaching part, I'm sorry, I'm going to turn it over here in a second, but the coaching part is so specific to a business, but it's really about asking the question of, do you really think that's going to do anything? Like, tell me, you're about to spend $500,000 with us. Is that going to turn into more than $500,000? Because if it's not, we don't want to be a part of that, because you're going to hate us. You just burned $500,000.
Can I spend $250 with you and not have you put any analytics in the app? Does that ever happen?
If you want to spend $250 with me, I'm in. Let's write I have a contract in my pocket that I brought. It's got your name on it.
The reason I ask the question is because as a product owner, oftentimes, if you're not careful, analytics, measurement, data collectors, things like that become sort of the caboose on the train. And sometimes the train needs to get a little faster because of a deadline, right? And somebody stands up and says, well, we can't hit that date if we've got to go and do all of this work to enable analytics.
And you unhinge it, and it's gone.
Right. So, I mean, sometimes there's trade-offs that you have to make on time, schedule, cost, budget, what have you, that you just need to be pragmatic about not being able to measure everything that you might want, or focusing on the things that are really important.
Well, that's never happened at Cricket. Never. Kidding. I think you're right. I think, again, we go back to who is at the end of the day our customer, right? So I think for you and I, we have really a different. Sometimes our customer is the internal customer, even though they are keeping an eye on our external customer, and And whereas in the startup, you can say, you guys can bluntly come in and say, okay, really? Like, you know what I mean? And so when it comes to data, I've forgotten who said the quote, but data is only as good as you can use it, right? So even if you acquire all this fantastic data, it's only as good as you're able to turn it into something that makes sense. And there are a lot of people, a lot of smart people, that can make that data sing, but it takes time. And when you're talking about a startup or being quick to market on things, it becomes really challenging to take that data and turn and pivot quickly with that data to adjust to the customer, to be able to address their need quickly. And so not only is there the first challenge of acquiring the data, and then it's how do you use the data in a way that's practicable for the consumer so that it actually yields money for the corporation regardless of your size, right? And so I think, and do it quickly without incremental costs, without compromising any deadlines. And if you have to speed things up, then you've automatically kind of gotten behind the 8 ball.
And that makes a lot of sense, because the using data part of it, right, is so many people put the analytics platform in there to track when they're losing someone in the funnel, for example, and they never look at it. They never look at it. I hate that we had to do it because we just spent, a couple days on doing this thing. And so it is, I mean, sure, collect it, whatever, but if you're not going to use it, if you have no plans to, especially if it's a throwaway type of thing.
But you raised the point earlier about sometimes you don't realize you need it until it's too late.
That's
I'm
right.
always an advocate for doing it.
Okay, so we're running down on time before we get to the audience's questions, and I know we touched on omni-channel very briefly, and this is the mobile forum, and of course we're going to spend our time thinking and focusing on mobile, but I think all of us know that CX, the customer journey, all touch points are becoming equal, and easing the customer's journey through all of those touch points, mobile included, is really becoming the focus for many businesses. Certainly we spend a lot of time thinking about it, but how do you guys how does that affect your businesses, the way you operate within your businesses, and how does it affect the kind of products that you're building?
So I guess let me start, and you guys can pile on. Omnichannel is obviously a big deal in retail these days. Super important. And it gets to what I said earlier about the customer and sort of expectations and the way behavior is changing. The way people are shopping now is different than it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And, retailers and companies that have physical presences believe that, including the Home Depot, believe that they can be successful by connecting a physical presence, associates that work in a physical presence, i.e. a store, with a supply chain, with a robust digital experience. There's a lot of synergy there that companies can bring to the market. And we've been on we call it interconnected retail at the Home Depot, and we've been on a journey for 4 or 5 years. Aggressively pursuing an interconnected retail strategy. We have a long way to go, but we've done a lot of very successful things in the last 5 or 6 years in terms of giving our customers the ability to buy online and pick up in store, the ability to buy online and have it shipped to store. That brings new level of convenience to the shopping experience for home improvement. So we have a long ways to go, as I said, but we're very encouraged by the initial results, and also by the assets that we have to put together to really form an interconnected retail strategy. 2,000 stores and hundreds of thousands of associates and a state-of-the-art supply chain and a pretty good website and some good, mobile experiences. I mean, we still have a lot of things to improve, but the early results are encouraging for us.
I think for Cricut, our retail presence is over 9,000 points of distribution. So we have over 2,000 stores. We have quite a few retail locations. When I started with AO, the president of the organization said, "Think mobile first," right? And so really for us, being able to have an application, which we did launch, and it's now was the My AO application, which became the My Cricut application, is is one of those things that's consistent. So I think what I would encourage you to take away as Home Depot, Cricket, we have to have a place where the mobile device, it obviously is our focus tonight, but is an experience that is similar and leverages the benefit of a mobile device that a retail experience doesn't have. And I think sometimes we as technologists forget the benefit of the 5 billion mobile devices, and that as being a channel in and of itself, in that it has its own, like your ability to shop in your fuzzy slippers is great when you're at home, but what if you don't have home internet?
What if you don't have fuzzy slippers?
I know, and we need to remedy that, Casey. But you know what I mean. And so what happens is it makes the concept of mobile and being able to bring that shopping experience to literally wherever you are, and have it be as similar to walking into a Home Depot or a Cricket store or wherever you are, is a really refreshing thing. It can be dangerous, right? Like Amazon, I think everyone's heard about the story with the Amazon. It's great. It's a great user experience until your kid orders like $6,000 worth of stuff, and you're like, what? And you know what I mean? So that's.
Was that the Echo?
I'm sorry?
Which device were you talking about?
The Amazon application.
Okay.
Just one click.
One click, and you're like, I didn't realize that I needed that. What? So I mean, I bring that up because the ability and convenience of having that much power in your hand, the consumer power that is in your hand when you talk about omnichannel is exceptional. To me, over the past 10 years, what has changed, we had the internet before the iPhone. What we didn't have is the power to do as much as we can do wherever we are. And Google, Android and Google, I can shop and buy a whole list of stuff, because I've recently done it, on your application. Just like you can check your usage, pay your bill, and do everything on our application, which I'm sure you've done recently. So you know what I mean? And that's a tremendous amount of power in your hand.
You're right. You're absolutely right. And I mean, for a second, I'm looking at the Ninja multimedia back there. I mean, we haven't even begun to envision what the future will look like, right? In terms of creating digital experiences that, will put you in the center of Paris from your living room with your slippers on, right? Or will put you in, at the 50-yard line of a Falcons game or something like that. I mean, the virtual and the augmented, worlds are going to be incredible as they play out over the next, call it, 10 years.
What's interesting, you guys have such a different perspective because you guys sort of consume those technologies to a certain extent for the purpose of helping your customers, right? Versus like we sell you those technologies for the purpose of ourselves, I guess, would be the way to say that. But when these different channels, whether it's Alexa or mobile or Siri integration or that kind of stuff come out, right? The way that I look, this is personal experience, right? I'm looking at it in terms of, okay, here's the people that we currently work with. Here's the companies that we currently work with. How would this help them, right? And if you take the philosophy that all a company does is just bring two things together more efficiently, whether that's faster or cheaper or more consistently, that's all every company does. And so, we go and look at these things that are coming out, and we're honestly just taking that stuff and going, hey, so-and-so, this would really help your business. We think we can integrate into your existing platform. And for us, I love when this kind of stuff comes out because as developers, it's simple for us to take advantage of and implement because nowadays the platforms that they're building are so focused on providing the utmost productivity for a developer that, I'm just pressing buttons, right? And here's this thing, like that's so amazing. Not really, but the idea is that there's. I
think you're selling yourself a little short.
A bit.
I appreciate that.
A bit.
Not that easy.
Right.
We do appreciate the economics 101 though. Two entities to go to exchange value. Love it.
That's a little more complex.
That may have been a simplification of that.
Okay, we're at time. So we're thank you, panel, for that. We'll go to questions. So the question was that Apple and Google have two different approaches to information, data, maybe even AI you're referring to. Which do you think is going to win out?
And
why?
they'll just keep competing until something new comes along. And I mean, there was never really a clear winner necessarily in the desktop wars. I mean, maybe you call Microsoft a clear winner, but Mac came back, and people want that choice, even when it's binary like that. I don't think there will be a winner necessarily. It'd be interesting to find out when one of them collapses or when one of them starts to lose ground and someone comes in their place. But
right. So if I can rephrase that briefly, I'll try. I think it really, in the actual description piece for today, we actually kind of alluded to this, which was that mobile is actually becoming less about the mobile device and more about creating contextual experiences with different Internet of Things devices for consumers. And your question to the panel is, how does that play out in your world? Would that be? Yeah. Okay.
So, I mean, I'll take a stab at it, and these guys can maybe jump in as well. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. We have moved into sort of a post-mobile world, at least here in North America or in the United States or in urban areas of the United States where, bandwidth is plentiful and all around us. When you do travel globally, though, and you go to different places, it's like, whoa, there's no signal? I mean, that's a jarring moment, right? And you take for granted that you have 5 bars of coverage or you have good strong Wi-Fi when you're around. I think it is interesting to see the next generation though of what's on the the horizon, and I think about Alexa and the Echo device and the power of some of the voice recognition software that is being developed to deliver less friction. Now I can order something by really just speaking across the room rather than having to go and get my phone and open up an app and browse through 4 pages, add something to cart, check out, find my credit card. What we're looking to do, I think, is take more and more friction out of the buying process. At least that's what e-commerce companies are trying to do, to make it easier for you to spend money with us. Where it all goes, I mean, I think it's going to be interesting to see. We're in the very, very early stages of AI and of voice recognition and some of those technologies. But if we were sitting here 7 or 8 years ago, we would have been talking about, wow, isn't this smartphone thing just incredible?
Right.
I just got an iPhone 2 and look at this app store and I'm reading the Weather Channel and there's going to be a storm here in 10 minutes. I mean, you forget about how far we've come in such a short amount of time. And when I think about AR and VR and artificial intelligence, there are some things that are going to be scary in this world, 10 or 12 years from now, that I think we as a society need to be very vigilant in terms of keeping an eye on. But it's certainly exciting to think about what the opportunities are for all of our companies as we kind of go forward. But I would caution companies that, there has been lots and lots of money invested during different cycles in different initiatives. Think about the dot-com bust. That was really just a question of timing. We were too early back in the 90s with very ambitious ideas around grocery delivery service or something like that. And then, of course, there's also the dustbin of history of CD-ROMs and things like that. I mean, all of this technology is, think about it almost very short term, if you look at it over a long sort of time horizon. So I'm excited to see what, the world looks like in 10 years and the world that, my kids grow up in versus the one that I grew up in, which was Ataris and Commodore 64s and things like that. They don't know a world without smartphones. And, that's going to be an interesting world to grow up in.
I think
Sorry for the long-winded
I think
discourse.
you talked about a lot of really relevant things. I think what's interesting, at least at Cricket, is, and I hear this a lot when I talk to folks, is we as technologists are thinking about the future. We have to. That's what we do. Your interest, if you're here because you're interested in technology and what the future holds for technology, to be where you think where the puck is going to be, so you can take advantage of it, so you can make money off of it, so you can come up with a new business idea and do that. So really that's what it comes down to. The customer, if you look at the customer though, they don't care. And the reason I bring that up is I think that this is incredibly innovative, exciting stuff. And it's tough when you're trying to figure out where you're going to put your money in as a small business and invest in what's the up and coming technology. What I think we as consumers want is simple, easy, convenient,
Cheap.
We would prefer to say cost efficient and effective, but it is, and so I think that when you look at what the future holds, you have to keep in mind it has to be solving a business problem for our customers. It can't just be a cool idea, and that's the one thing I have an Echo. Everyone that comes into my house that gets to see it thinks it's the coolest thing since sliced bread, and they get to boss the lady around, which my son thinks is fun as well. But the problem is, it's a cool idea, but the question is how is that technology making our life easier and better? And that to me is, I agree with you, it's an exciting piece, but how are we going to make that exciting and better in the future?
Yeah, and the answer is
Joe, if
specific.
you could keep yours short, please.
Yeah,
because I want to make sure that we get to some more questions.
There's one other facet I want you to think about, which is developing mobile software is actually, I'm not going to pat myself on the back here, it's kind of trivial. When you develop an entire system of connected things, that requires a significantly more talented person and a more experienced person. And so until we get to the point where we develop platforms to take care of that for us, it's going to be much more expensive.
That's great. I'm going to summarize. Really, where do you see the effect of mobile payments, and where do you see mobile payments going?
They probably have a better perspective on the business aspects of it. From a developer standpoint, right now, there's a lot of old players that have existed, and the way that you integrate with their systems, you just take a fork and you gouge your eyes out, and you just hope for the best, right? And now things like Stripe are coming along, and there's Apple Pay, and there's Google Pay, and so now we're going to see that, because it's so much easier to implement, it's going to be a lot more prevalent within a lot of different applications.
I think for my experience on this, I think it was a bifurcated market until Apple Pay and Google Pay sort of forced the issue, right? And so I would argue it depends on how you look at this and who the customer is that you're addressing. But in terms of mobile payments, I think, again, simplifying the process to ensure that customers are understanding the process and are willing to try to do it and give their money over to their mobile device and do that. I think that's the biggest impediment to this. Whereas Google Pay and Apple Pay have sort of broken that barrier. And I think that there's more to come, but with every advancement, you have people who are trying to hack into that space, right? So you've got to be careful. And I think the trust factor is the biggest challenge to overcome, not the technology. I think you guys can figure it out pretty darn quick. I think it's a question of whether the consumer is willing to trust that payment method.
As you're innovating in the mobile space, how much is the existing infrastructure holding back that innovation? How much do you have to kind of dip back into the infrastructure and get that change before you can innovate in the experience on the mobile?
Yeah,
That's all you, man.
God, every day of my life. It's honestly, it's so case specific, but it's a great question. I wish I had a general purpose answer. But you get to a stopping point and they say this is the hard line and this has existed for 40 years and it would be our entire business to undo this, so figure it out. And then you build layers on top of it that effectively reduce the shock that happens between a system that was built for me to go put a punch card in and a mobile device, which needs to happen immediately. There's a lot of concepts out there around eventual consistency, which is, we're implementing Internet of Things, we're implementing in banking now, honestly, and we are specifically involved in projects like that right now, and it's just about absorbing that shock. And that's a harder challenge than just going back and rewriting it, but no one lets you go do that.
So I think your question is basically how do you prioritize the different platforms and how do you think about leaving money on the table or a part of the market on the table?
So as a person who has worked with in-house developers and external developers, you go where the customer is. And I'd say, at Cricket we support all 3 operating systems. If you're asking, it can be a philosophical and religious question as to what right? Like it really is. What do you do HTML5 or do you do native? I think it depends on the application. In some instances, you can guide. I mean, I don't know about you, but sometimes you can do HTML5 and it's good enough for the experience, and it'll cruise through pretty much anything. It's when you start talking about, as the gentleman earlier mentioned, you start talking about payments and interfaces with payment systems and how that's all going to work. Sometimes that can break down because you're dependent on other interfaces, and it can be a little bit more of a challenge. In our instance, we develop pretty much everything in all 3 operating systems. So I'm sure it's a Cricket Wireless phone. Thanks. And so but it depends. Good enough. We'll go with that. But it depends on the needs of the application itself.
I can spend an hour on that, so if you want to chat afterwards, I don't want to bore everyone with that.
Some of it was observation, I think, personal observation. But your question was really around kind of, it really goes to feature prioritization, right? How do you kind of make the decision between either building a feature-rich application, which may try and hit all use cases, or focus on maybe even providing multiple applications, maybe one or more, kind of being more specific and targeted towards a single task?
Yeah, so great question, because one of the things that definitely will throw people or throw developers or throw product managers off course is there always should be 2 or 3 things, or maybe even one thing that your app is really, really great at doing. You know, the Uber app is great at getting you a car, right, and getting you from one place to another fairly economically. You know, that's a very primary use case for a Home Depot customer. Is this item in the store that is near me? How much does it cost? Can I go there today and get it? So that is one that we lean into. And I want to provide 5 nines of accuracy against that use case. One of the complicating factors is 2,000 stores, 35,000 different SKUs in those stores, and managing kind of real-time inventory. You know, it gets complicated quickly. I feel reasonably good about our ability to deliver on that use case. Maybe not 5 nines, but maybe 2 nines, which is still pretty good. But you know, that's one that definitely, you know, we want to be great at. That exact use case that you just talked about. Is this item in the store? Can I order it now and pick it up when I get there? Will they have it? Will it be the right product? I mean, it gets complex very quickly, but that's one that we definitely try to go after.
That's great. Kelly, Matt, Joe, great job. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Casey.